Yo, what's up? Welcome back. He's Greg. I'm your boy Robert. It's the All Out of Fucks podcast. What's good with you? We got a special guest today. We can't wait to introduce y'all. We have a what we think to be a good topic. So as usual, we appreciate you guys coming. What we appreciate you subscribing, checking us out on your favorite platform. With that being said, what's good with Minute? What's going on?
Man, look. All right, so this has been a long week. Long, long week. But I'm ready to go. It's a good day. The Boilers done sat there and won a game. So
Boiler up.
that's what I'm saying.
Motherfuckers, let's go.
Let's do this shit and train running.
Shit.
Train is
Can't wait.
running.
Let's get it. I'm mad we ain't playing Ohio State this year.
I mean,
Shit.
they want another ass whooping. I
I don't
mean,
give a fuck. Yeah, you want them hands.
they
It's
want
all
them
good.
hands. We can give them them hands. That's gonna piss every Ohio State
Don't
fan.
give a fuck. You know the name of the podcast.
I
We
know,
all out
right?
of them. Don't
That
give a
shit
fuck.
gonna piss them
Speak the
all
truth.
off. They were like, I used to like this goddamn show. Fuck them niggas.
Yeah, it's all good. Shit. Truth is truth. But hey, shit, we looking forward to today's topic. We're gonna jump into some heavy stuff and see where it goes. But take care of some business here. As always, you can find us on every major platform: Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeart Radio, TuneIn. Shit, basically everywhere. Y'all know where to find us. Google Play. Y'all can check us out there too. I saw somebody share our stuff on there. So and check us out on our social media: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That's me not turning my phones and shit off. So you can
God,
check
we
us out on
do.
all those platforms and comment. I've noticed, for whatever reason, last week's episode definitely sparked some
Struck a nerve.
conversation from some folks, and some of the Tea Partiers came out of the woodworks wanting to make comments and some shit. But fuck it, we got time for y'all too. So
Yeah,
it's all good.
I was noticed. I was noticing. All right, so let's get into that for a second. Like I said, I've been in the weeds all week long. It's been a long week, but I got on to the Instagram today, and I'm checking out the account or whatever, and I just see this whole back and forth that you had with a couple of people, and I'm like, what the fuck going on? And then I look at this one. I don't even know how to. What is this? Machiavelli East Side,
Yeah, I don't know
whatever.
who the fuck that is. Like,
Yeah, Machiavelli East.
his
That's
shit
an
was just like,
incoherent.
you know how you look at somebody like,
It's an
do you even know what we're
incoherent
talking
fucking
about here?
rant.
Like, but hey,
Motherfucker's
look,
incoherent as motherfucker. I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? And then he started talking about black women want kings and random
yeah,
shit, and then
and
put his
yeah,
goddamn Walmart grocery list together on the shit. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
it
what is
was,
going
it
on?
was, it was a bit off topic. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. So
But
I just like to say to them, who if it's a him or a her or whoever, uh, your shit's incoherent. I don't know what the fuck you talking about. I hope you okay and you didn't stroke while typing this because this some bullshit here. So I'm just gonna call it what
well,
I see.
we had a couple of Trump people come out too, and they clearly misinterpreted what the episode was about. They thought it was a Trump endorsement. They clearly didn't listen to that shit. So uh, it's all good. But hey, we appreciate you listening. So that being said, Greg, why don't you go ahead and introduce our lovely guest?
All right, so hey y'all, check it out. We got a special guest in the house today. Now I've known him for a very long time.
Very long
Uh,
time.
yeah, so I won't get into like all the personals about this, but I'm gonna tell you right now, she's a straight cool ass person who knows her shit. Very intelligent woman, and that's Killer Cam. And
Cam,
hey, what's happening?
Hey, everyone. Much love. It feels good to be back with family.
That's what I'm saying.
To be on this podcast, to even be asked to be on this podcast, because sometimes, my opinion is heavy and it goes off into the void. So definitely appreciate the love and being here with you guys tonight.
Well, see,
all
and that's what I wanted to get into because, truthfully, like, I mean, I'm rarely on Facebook anymore, so I mean that's a side note. But y'all, if y'all looking for me on Facebook, I was heavy, obviously, for when Facebook was hot, and then about 4 years ago, I was heavy into it. So I don't get it twisted, but then I just moved on from it. I'm on my Twitter more than I'm on Facebook now. So, but like I used to drop these bombs, and Cam will tell you, I used to just get on my fucking shit and just drop bombs and be like, all right, come at me or whatever. And then I had a post just the other day where, and it wasn't a bomb, it was just me literally going, because what I'm starting to notice is we get closer and closer to this election, because we getting down to it. I mean, what are we, less than 10 days, like something like that? So
Yeah, something like that.
yeah, so we getting closer to this election. What I've noticed is a lot of the single issue voters are starting to really pop their heads out their holes, and I'm like, okay, let's be clear. So like my post was, my country means more to me than just my pocket, because most of the single issue voters that's coming out right now is all about taxes and the economy. So I
See,
just
I
want,
thought you was coming for 50. That's what I thought.
well, I was, but I'm
Okay,
just
that's what
saying.
I thought.
Yeah,
Let's cut. Let's cut the bullshit.
that's
Let's
cut
just
the
say he was coming
bullshit.
for 50.
Yeah, I was coming for 50 because I'm just
He was
like,
coming for
okay,
you, Curtis.
look, I ain't scared. Fuck it. But no,
Yeah, 50 put you in his Twitter rant and don't give a fuck, but it's all good.
that's fine. That's
Shit.
fine. I mean, but
Go ahead
I
and put
mean,
us in that rant. We don't give a fuck. We don't give a
we
shit.
don't give two fucks now. But so I put that post, and Cam dropped some knowledge in it that I was like, you know what? The rest of the world need to hear this. And also, this is a topic that a lot of people are just kind of like, I don't want to say brushing by, but truthfully, some people don't know, but a lot of people are brushing by. So I was like, I got to get Cam on so she can drop her point. And because it's true, in the black community, we got this love affair with this goddamn country, that this country don't have this love affair with us. And it's almost like Stockholm syndrome, where we sitting here trying to figure out ways to get this country to love us. And in reality, and I'll let you explain your point, Cam, but I'm just saying, in reality, she's all like, hey, fuck this then. If they don't want us, fuck them. So, but I'll let you do it. I'll let you say what you got to say. But I figured that was going to be a great topic for discussion, because, this all out of fucks podcast. So we don't give no fucks.
All right. So
Yeah.
first things first, before we jump into the topic, why don't we? As y'all know, we always do a little blow and smoke session. We was fucking around a little bit,
Mm.
but shit. I know Greg talked about his week was super long. My weeks ain't long. My weeks are just fucking delirious these days, man. Like with with this newborn and this 2 year old. I know y'all getting sick of hearing about these two little rugrats, but let me tell you something. Like shit is real life. Like and I can't drink like I used to. Like, cause you got to be on top of your shit. So and I can't
That's
smoke.
I was about to say, that's how you know you on top of your shit, when you can sit there, have your drink in one hand, the baby in the other, and they both. That's what I'm talking about. Like, look, this is a feat. This is some
Yes.
magical
We got
shit.
Yeah,
many
you might be.
mothers out there who have mastered that and they don't look like us. So
Yeah, you're right. So
Do it
that
all the time.
shit, that's my week. As we were talking about, hey, them boilers got it in. Shout out to all my Purdue Boilermakers out there. Boiler up. We hopefully gonna get it in this season. Unfortunately, IU won too. Fuck them guys, but it's all good.
Ooh, IU sucks.
But that being said, that's all I had to really jump into on the blowing smoke. I didn't really have much. My weeks are pretty much that's it. Trying
You,
to.
you know who went to IU that I didn't know about?
What do you mean? Somebody we know or somebody famous?
Somebody famous.
I have no idea who you're talking
They
about.
they, they fucking suck though. Star Lord went to IU.
He
He's a
didn't go to
bitch.
IU.
He's a bitch.
He didn't go to IU. I'm about to say, Cam's like, what the fuck are y'all talking about? Have you seen Avengers, Cam?
I have not.
Oh, okay. So it's gonna see is unless you've seen the movie, you're not gonna understand it. But it's all good. That'll be like a homework assignment. Go check out Avengers.
I got it.
And before you come at me in our fucking Instagram feed and Twitter and shit, yes, I know fucking Chris Pratt and go to goddamn IU. I was
Yeah,
talking
it's gonna
about
be some.
Star Lord, because you know that's what
It's
they're
gonna be
going to.
some. It's gonna be
Yeah.
some lame dude that come out. Hey, he didn't go to Indiana
You
University.
didn't go
He
there.
didn't
You
go to
guys don't
college.
know what the fuck you're
You
talking
know what? I do know the controversy thanks to my 16-year-old because she's all about Chris Pratt. And so apparently Chris Pratt is on the cancel list. So I know a little
Oh,
bit about it.
now that
Well,
actually was
that's
interesting.
different. Yeah.
I actually don't know what did happen with him because I've been seeing headlines, but I just haven't gave enough of a fuck to look into it. So
Well,
Well, just like
yeah.
anybody, you cannot cross the line when it comes to the LGBTQ community. And so, finding out that he was part of a conversion church, that doesn't sit well with
also they just found out he's a part of something. He didn't say nothing. They just
No, he
yeah,
ain't say nothing. He didn't even endorse anybody.
yep.
I
He's
mean
he just won't
sometimes
explain himself
maybe
is
going
what they're mad
overboard
at.
sometimes.
No,
Yeah, we're going.
it
I mean, as Dave Chappelle said, the alphabet community will come for you, and
Mm.
like you cannot play around. Like, and it's a strong lobby too. So I mean, but that's interesting that he hasn't even said anything. I can understand if he like had made some comments, and then they like, oh, you're part of this group on top of that shit. But so basically, they're canceling him because they found out he's a part of that shit.
Yeah, they're canceling because he minded his own business.
And I can't say that you can just be members of shit and you don't have to be accountable for that shit. Because I mean, if I find out somebody's like a part of the KKK or some shit, then I'm gonna have some issues and we're gonna talk about it, right? But
Right.
it is what it is. I guess I'll stay in my lane. But
is. I mean, but
for now, for now,
honestly, when it comes to other demographics, other groups, other social groups, human activist groups, we still lagging behind.
oh
Like,
yeah,
we cancel our own before we cancel an outsider.
oh
So
yeah, facts, absolutely. I mean, well, shit, nothing better than a transition like that to kind of jump in. Unless y'all got something for the blowing smoke session, just
I
jump
had a
into it.
perfect week. I'm in a winning space, so
There
I
you
can't
go.
complain. I
Hey,
got a 16-year-old who's killing it, crushing the virtual learning, homeschool pandemic edition. I got
shit.
new opportunities ahead of me, so life is great. So I mean, I think, wait, I woke up maybe about. I tried to go to bed early, and I woke up around 1, and I ran across a video by, which is still segment, but as a segue, I'm sorry, but Mario Van Peebles, and I think if anything, that's the thing that I have to blow smoke about is just our parroted responses to people with different ideologies and approaches to life, and how we get onto the coon wagon and the sellout wagon and the Uncle Tom just because people don't share the same ideologies. Yet we can see, our political leaders, both Republican and Democrat, golfing with each other, breaking bread with each other, making money with each other.
Right.
So that's always my smoke.
Well, yeah, election season, black folks are good for falling out with each other over some white folks who don't really give a fuck about them. But I mean, that's just kind of how that shit work out. And I just think it's interesting, kind of, and a little bit. It's a little bit revisiting our topic from last week. I just find it super interesting. Like, so everybody was mad at Ice Cube about meeting with Trump. Meanwhile, your boy Biden out here talking about putting Republicans in his cabinet. So I find it really interesting that black folks who go super hard for the Democrats are like, I'm cool with that, but you mad at Cube for simply just communicating a black agenda to both sides. Like that shit don't make any sense to me. Like
I
make it make sense, Cam.
don't get it. Like, well, I get it, but I don't understand how this is usually coming from our most elite and our most educated. So I don't understand like what the payoff is, I think I do understand it, but when you really are talking about being, having using a critical lens, um, processing information. I love all black people, but the minute a black person does something that I don't agree with, then I'm ready to cancel them, shut them down. They are this, they're cool. That the name calling begins, and that's the part that I really can't reconcile right now. Like I really don't know, why do we feel like we have to protect our oppressor so much?
Yeah, I mean people be caping for these white guys. Like they be like, hey, I can't let that go. I can't let that go unanswered. but we quick to be like, oh, we come for our own real quick. And I think that happens out of a sense of like hopelessness sometimes, where black folks feel like they can't really affect the system, so they feel like, well, at least I can affect my immediate circle or just the culture, right? So they kind of just
Yes.
jump in there and they jump out the window on some shit that I don't even think they really disagree with that much, but they just want to be seen protecting the institution so much. It doesn't make sense to me. But I mean, that's kind of
And
off topic a little bit, but
when you think about it, so I'm sure you're familiar, or maybe you're not, but Zakia shared a post, and I'm sorry, an article, and I'm sorry I don't have all the details on it, but I'll make sure I get those details for you guys to share out. But the author is a Garveyite. He identifies as a Garveyite, and I mean he went
oh, I think I
in.
saw that. Yeah, it's on
Oh
Medium. We'll
yes,
post it.
and
We'll post it on the show notes. I know exactly. As a matter of fact, she posted it on the person you're talking about posted it on one of mine posts as well. We're a mutual friend,
yeah.
um, but she's an advocate for just black folks in general, specifically our black children in school systems, but similar to Cam. But um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I saw that he went all the way in, and I get it. I don't know necessarily I go as far as he goes, but I totally get his premise, and I mean I don't disagree with much actually, but we'll
And
put that
that's
on
what it is. When you look at, and I think the images,
there.
more than anything, really makes you sit down and have to think. So you take some of our great black leaders, Black Panthers, and if they are still around today, how they went from being communists, Marxists, to Democrats, and being political prisoners of war. Like I don't connect. So just not to be long winded, but I remember when I started doing the work with racial justice now, education equity, working on behalf of our kids, organizing on behalf of policy and legislation that protected the rights of Black children. Um, I realized very soon the experience was great, but I realized, I believe, on my second trip to DC. Matter of fact, I think it was my first trip because we stayed in the organization that was paying for everything. We stayed in the Omni Sheraton in DC. And I'm talking about, this is a historical um, hotel.
Mhm.
Um, I think everyone who stayed, who came into DC for JFK's funeral stayed at that hotel. So that should tell you, the
Yeah.
caliber of hotel, I was
Right.
staying in. All the accommodations were taken care of. And we stayed at nice, we ate at nice restaurants. And it hit me. I was like, this is why it's hard to keep our Black political leaders on our side, because there are perks. And when you're coming from, most of us are coming from working class, struggling class, impoverished communities. Um, and then when you want the change, but then when you get into this position, when you get a seat at the table, and they're paying all your bills, they're giving you perks, you're flying out, you're doing this, you're doing that. And
Mhm.
it's not so much you're selling out, but it's hush money. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, we're going to take care of you as long as you, and we'll take care of your issues later. But right now, we need you to work on this and focus on this. So I think this is why we see a lot of this protection of this established political system that does not support Black lives in any shape, form, or fashion.
Well, that's actually, I mean, that's a good transition. Greg, why don't you kind of just introduce what we're talking about today? I mean, that's an excellent transition, just talking about that investment that folks have in just maintaining the apparatus as it is, but just kind of, let everybody know where we're going and just shit, we'll jump into
So,
this shit.
yeah, I was about to say. So basically, we're just talking about this. I mean, for lack of a better word, just this love affair Black folks have. I mean, Doc Rivers said it. What, just almost a month ago?
Hmm.
Well, Black folks love this, love a country that don't love us. And it's something about that, and it that can go to any relationship. If you think about it, it goes to any relationship. So if it was a man woman relationship, or I guess before the alphabet come at me, woman
A
woman.
romantic, intimate
There you
relationship.
go. If it was a romantic, because the alphabet was ready, they was like, "Why I got to be a man?" Look, you can be with your husband if you want. I don't give a shit. Now, um, but I'm just saying, if it was a romantic relationship and one side was all over the other side, and the other side was not reciprocating or didn't give a fuck, the first thing your friends would tell you to do is be like, "Leave that person alone." That'd be the
Exactly.
first thing they'd say. Why are you jocking them? Why are you all up in their ass? They don't care about you. They don't like you. This is stupid. This is retarded. Why are you doing it? And before they get the sensitive folks come at me for be saying retarded, I'm not talking about special needs people. Jesus Christ. Read a dictionary. Now we got that one out the way too. But it for some reason black folks have this love affair with this country, and it has constantly abused us, and with no end in sight. Yet and still, like you said, we get a piece of something and we're like, well, I just want to hold on to my piece. Now, there's nothing crazy about that, because I'm gonna tell you right now, if you are in a cage and you're in the basement or solitary confinement, and somebody sat there and said, "I'm gonna give you a hour of light a day," you're gonna jump at that hour of light. You just are. So that part I understand. The part I don't understand is how we can get completely frustrated with it to the point of not actually doing something about it. And so when Cam got on the post and wrote what she wrote, I was like, okay, here's somebody that's trying to do something about it. We need more people like her than the other folks that are just gonna sit there and say, "Don't do that," blah blah blah. It don't matter. Get the fuck out the way. Get the fuck out the way. But don't sit here every 4 years and complain about some shit and then act like you know what the fuck you talking about when you sitting there going, "With the Republicans are this and the Democrats do the exact same thing." And then what the fuck are you doing? Because the way I look at it, it's all numbers to me. So if it's more people doing something about it, then the numbers will sit there and dictate what the fuck either party will do. You either hijack a party. I think I wrote on there, Cam, you either hijack a party, you come up with a party. And we talk about this on the show all the time, Bobby. I said Black Lives Matter is going to eventually go from a movement to a party. It might
Yeah,
not have that name,
yeah.
but
I'm not so sure about that. Like as far as that particular organization, but
that's what I'm
um,
saying. It might not be that, but that's going to be a party of some sort.
but so I mean, I feel what y'all saying, but to an extent, though, I mean, there is a group of folks who would actually take the approach that, and it may look like they're not doing anything, but some folks take the approach that kind of like, fuck it, let's just watch the shit burn and kind of go from there, right? Because the idea is, why am I going to engage myself on either side that has no interest in seeing my people be successful? And ultimately, they would rather see all the shit kind of just, hey, maybe it just needs to get burnt down and find a way to start from scratch. Now, the question then becomes, I mean, you guys were kind of talking about this in your back and forth on social media. Basically, okay, I mean, what does that mean for you personally? Like, if you let the shit, crumble, how does that personally impact you? Is that good for your general just, well-being, or, can you survive that? What is the situation? But I mean, there is something to be said for the philosophy that, we don't have a dog in either fight, right? You got two sides of the same coin who basically are focused on maintaining, economic control on, this country, and everybody else is just collateral damage. I mean, so I mean, I get what you're saying. Generally, you got to have a plan, and I don't necessarily think that we have to let it go that far, but we have to be careful about how we're approaching this shit, right? So if folks are running around here trying to appeal to the better angels of folks' nature, that shit ain't gonna work, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm said that shit a lot. He said, "Look, this is an empire, and in an empire, they never get in touch with their better selves, right? It's
Yeah.
never gonna happen, right? So empires aren't redeemable. People are, but empires are not, right?
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do we reverse course? Because it's inevitable that this country fall unless we do something drastically different. So,
What?
Exactly. So I'm actually one of the ones who feels unapologetically let this shit burn. Why? Because when I look at the foundation of this country, the history of this country, Black people were the creators, but we there was no benefit. We had no benefit, and so now we can see some 400 years later there is a progressive benefit in the fact that your kids can go to school, our kids can go to school with whatever school district we decide we want to live in, pay taxes in. They can't be discriminated against. However, someone has said this: when we when we kind of catch up, they move the goalpost. So you have actual communities, white communities, who say, I don't like the type of people who are now starting to move into my neighborhood and go to school, and their kids are going to school with my kids. So what they end up doing is they rezone. They rezone in order to keep the purity of their neighborhood, of their community, and you got homeowners associations. These are those little bitty systemic things where every time we feel like, okay, well, we got a part of the piece of the pie and we can be doctors and we can be lawyers and we can be Supreme Court justices, we're still never going to be equal to them. They're still 10 steps ahead of us. They still have enough power and economic power and influence to say, you know what, we're going to shift courses. First, they were moving out to the rural areas and to the suburbs, and now they're coming back, gentrification. So, whatever they decide is the better move for them to get away from us, they do it. But we're still trying to follow them everywhere they go.
Well, that's part of the
And
problem, right? Because I mean, the biggest lie we tell ourselves or we try to tell other black folks is that somehow integration was good for us, right? And when in actuality, it probably well, let me put it this way: the way it was crafted damaged our community, right? Because what it was a hijacking of our civil rights agenda, right?
Mhm.
So our agenda was never to say, "Hey, y'all, we need to be a part of your community. Can we come join it?" We were never saying that.
We
What
were
we were
saying we want to
saying
be
through all
equal.
that what we were saying through all that legislation, not even necessarily that we want to be equal, we want access to equal resources, right?
Mhm.
Equal
yeah,
access to opportunity. So yeah, I guess we want to be equal. But
Gotcha.
then it got flipped around. They're like, well, fuck that. We're not about to let you be equal and give you equal resources over there by yourselves. We will integrate you into our house, and that's
Where
the
we
only
can
way y'all gonna
dictate.
get you right. That's the only way we're gonna give y'all equal resources if you
yeah,
come to our shit. Like otherwise, y'all not getting equal resources. So you have integration, but
yeah,
what people don't like to talk about, pre-integration, despite all the other shit, the negative shit that's associated with it, but we had our own economic base, right? Because we were
Hmm.
forced to do that, right? So we wasn't going to McDonald's, we was going to McDowell's, right? We was
yeah,
going
yeah,
wherever,
yeah,
we was
Right.
going to black hotels, black doctors, all this other type of stuff. Soon as civil rights legislation passed and we could go to all these places, now all of a sudden we want to go to McDonald's and we want to go to Holiday Inn and all these other places, and we forget about all the spots in the neighborhood. And then we're the only community that's effectively divested our economic power outside of our community without kind of recycling it and keeping it in the community. And we're the only community that looks at it like it's a bad thing to make sure that we insulate and inoculate ourselves from the outside world, right? We're so thirsty to take on the burden of this country and take on just the mores and the morality and the code of this country that we forget about our own people. And you all know it. Like even when it comes to going to black businesses, like we're so hard on black business, right? Like
hmm
a
Super
black
hard on black business.
a black business could fuck some shit up one time. We're like, oh fuck that, I'm not
yeah,
going back. But
Janky ass niggas.
but
yeah. And
let
then go
PF
back and post about it.
Yeah.
well, yeah, but then let PF Chang's fuck your shit up. You'll be right back next week and be like, that was just a bad experience.
I was about to say Starbucks fuck people shit up all the time. You gonna
But they
see
go back every time. So
every morning.
so think about the psychology and the mind fuck that you won't give your people multiple chances, but you'll give this system and this apparatus all the changes. So I mean, it's a slight deviation from what we're talking about. I think the point is, trying to figure out, what is there a better is there a strategy we can take that says, okay, we can somehow operate within this system that exists. I don't tend to believe that that's the case. Or do we have to tear this shit down completely? Or is there a third road that we're just not thinking about, or third rail, so to speak?
And that's
Pick
where,
me, pick me.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah,
I think that there's a third way. I don't think that we have to actively participate in destroying this established
sure.
system.
Yeah,
I think we need to shift our energy and our focus into actually creating the infrastructure that is necessary for us to be able to thrive regardless of what happens around us, because what we see right now, we see two ultimately racist white men or people, or one that's just kind of like such a loose cannon, and racism is in his go bag, but so is sexism and every other ism.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a white man who has a history of creating, supporting, approving, authoring policies that have created systemic racism and has upheld this separate but definitely not equal, equal situation. And we're looking for him to be our savior, and we're looking for him. We understand the country needs change, we get that, but what I don't understand is how we can have a conversation and, like you said, be so in love with the democratic choice who has really taken our fathers away. You both of them. You have black men being incarcerated, with longer sentences, which means that, okay, I might have committed a crime, but as opposed to doing 6 months probation or even 3 years, I got to do 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And now I can't raise my kids that I left out there in the community. They're being raised by a single mom who may not have access to the resources that she needs to take care of my kids. So then you want to turn around and be like, oh, well, black men don't take care of their kids. Yeah, that's because they're locked up. So my thing is, why are we so gung ho to save this country from Trump, when really white people are like, both parties are going to have to come to a head in order for it's a pimple. You know what I'm saying? So in order for the pimple to heal, it has to come to a head. But if we're focused on making sure we have our schools, we have enough teachers, educators, PhDs, we have enough, we have actually enough wealth to start building smaller community schools, right?
right.
And supporting that. And we have professionals, we have doctors, we have lawyers. We're coming back into farming. So I'm so confused as to why we feel like we need this infrastructure for our survival when we actually are the ones who created this country, every fiber of it.
And I think that's where it gets a bit confusing for some, because there's twofold to this dynamic, because like you said, uh, we created this. So some people are approaching it from the sense of, I don't want to destroy it because I spent too much fucking time building it. Although they don't see me as the builder and owner of this shit, my people built this shit for 400 fucking years. So I just don't want to blow it up to prove a point. So you have those people on that side, and then you have the others who just clearly, the what's wrong with that is, you say we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have judges and all that. What's wrong with that is the other side to that is those people have now assimilated into this particular society, so they don't view themselves as we.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Well,
Look. I mean, you can look at fucking Clarence Thomas, and I'm not sitting here calling him any type of name, but he does not view himself as a we. That's just
Correct.
fact. That is just fact.
well,
So if you have all these people though, and they are successful, and they could sit there and build the community up, you have to now retrain their train of thought or their mindset to go, oh, this is my people over here. Because truthfully, everybody spends all their time saying black people are not a monolith, blah, blah, blah. What makes us a monolith in some regard is the fact of the struggle that most of us all have to go through. We can associate with the struggle if we don't even associate with each other.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is our experience is monolithic, right? Like, so the
Yeah,
oppression that we face is monolithic, but the our thought processes aren't necessarily that because of the
correct.
complicated nature of the progress, however you want to call it, that we've made, right? But I do want to kind of revisit something you said, Greg. So like this idea that there's a sense of almost pride in the country because it was built off the blood of our ancestors, and but I, because I've had that conversation before, but
Mhm.
is it possible to have that sense of pride in a country where your ancestors were forced to build it?
No, I just
Like,
think it's. I
I
just
mean,
think it's. I think some people have a mindset of it's their birthright more or less than anything.
yeah, I feel like for me, it's a matter of this is you owe me money, motherfucker. Like
That okay.
Yeah,
That too. Yeah.
that's how I feel. Like
Okay. We can put it that way
I
too.
don't feel a sense of pride. I feel a sense of uh you need to pay your bill, motherfucker. Like I
Right.
feel like that person that you loan money to, that constantly coming around you all the time, and they got new shit all the time. They got a new coat, they got a new car, they got
Right.
all types of new shit, knowing damn well they owe you cheddar. Like, hey, look, man, you need to come. We need to figure this shit out, and that's how I feel about when I talk about slavery and I talk about how black folks built this country. For me,
Hmm.
reparations is one of the single most there's two issues that I think are the biggest issues that I think will go a long way if we're going to um, avoid the trajectory that every other empire has taken in history. One of them is reparations, the other is policing, which
yeah,
is
Hmm.
why I go so hard on policing, because you can fix all these other issues. You can fix economics. You can fix all types of stuff, but the one thing you can't fix is the police state and how this country enforces its laws against black folks because they view the color of our skin as a weapon.
Hmm.
So once you correct for all the other shit, you still got to deal with shit as far as interacting with law enforcement. And no matter what some of these bougie niggas will tell you about feeling like they can go live in gated communities, or they feel
yeah,
like they live in nice communities and they feel like they inoculated from it, it's all fun and games until they need you, until somebody in their family's a hashtag, and now they need the community to wrap their arms around. Right.
Hmm.
yeah,
So and we talked about that in one of our first episodes, Greg, when we talk about Black Karens. But
Right.
um, the the point is, you know,
We got a bunch of pushback from that too.
we, we just got to be careful about the investment we put in this country, right? I mean, a lot of it, is understanding our value. And I don't think we necessarily understand our value yet. And I think when it comes to the idea of black patriotism, we tend to fall in two camps. I think we tend to fall in this camp of patriotism with critique, right? So you got black folks who are patriots and they love the country, but they also don't blindly love it. Where like it's because it's different. Like white folks will blindly love this motherfucker. They're like, I just love this country. I love it. It's amazing. Of
Greatest
course, it's
country on
amazing,
earth.
right? But like black folks will be like, I get that there's a lot of good opportunities here. I get that, but there's some shit that needs to be fixed. So you got that group of folks who tend to be the folks who have an investment in the system, and they're the ones that talk your head off about working within the system, right? So those are those folks. Then you got some folks who are like, nah, I ain't got no patriotism to this country, that has never seen me as an actual person or citizen and has never done anything to remedy this country's original evil, right? Its
Hmm.
original sin. So therefore, fuck it. I don't feel any particular type of way about it.
Right.
but see, okay, so go back to our experiences being monolithic here in the 21st century in 2020. That unfortunately is not true,
Mm,
because of the 60 years where we've had access to white institutions of higher learning, living in white communities, educating our children in white communities and white schools. Even though there was all this system, we allowed ourselves to kind of tune out the microaggressions,
sure.
um, and we kind of just accepted the fact that we just have to work harder, and we just have to do this, and we just have to do that. But we've internalized this truth while we are breaking bread with someone who sees us as one of the good ones, if that makes sense. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? So, oh, you're not like those other ones. And that is a microaggression in and of itself because now I'm separating myself from my people
Mhm.
because the oppressor done
Well,
sent me
yeah.
in front of
Well,
them.
because and there's people that take pride in that position, like, oh yeah. So because there's folks who were in the boardroom, who are the one person that made it in, and
Yeah.
they so focused on keeping their seat that they don't even want to put effort or resources into making sure there's another person in the room with them. They like as soon as they see another person in the room, they start feeling threatened, like, oh shit. And
Yeah.
because these white folks only gave us one shot, so
Yes.
I need that one shot. And these white folks are good at pitting black folks against black folks. Like, okay, this is how we're going to handle that. So I mean, rather than us understanding that we can move in different ways and different tracks, and at the same time, and just being a little more strategic about shit, we don't have. It's just we don't have this. We don't have the same sense of camaraderie when it comes to working within the system, which is why I'm not sure that that's the most effective way to kind of combat some of the issues we're talking about. Because once you're involved in the system, you have a level of equity in it, right? So
Yes.
at that point, you have a level of investment in making sure that it continues on indefinitely. Which, when you're talking about a system, and I operate, I'm a lawyer, so I operate within the criminal
Mhm.
justice, civil justice system, and working within it, you understand that it's not a reformable system because it's working the way it's supposed to, right? The idea, it was when it's set up to put black folks, in a position where, basically we're replacing the labor that we were providing for free for hundreds of years. You understand that the system, it can't be reformed. Police, they can't be reformed because they're operating the way they're supposed to. So
Yeah.
it's not a matter of, well, they're not doing the stuff we asked them to. No, they're doing exactly what they were designed to do. Therefore, you have to totally tear the shit down and start over from scratch.
Yeah.
um,
And I think again, we don't necessarily have to participate in that. Like you said, more of our investment should just be
in each other.
in each other.
Right.
Because that system, one of my favorite movies is Troy, and I can watch that three-hour movie back to back.
Mm,
But you're looking at this empire, and regardless of who the protagonist is, who is who's the antagonist, the truth of the matter is there was an alliance.
right.
And for whatever human reason, that alliance was broken. Only there was only going to be one conqueror. You know what I'm saying? So you lose everything. And if you think about how much the state that we have in America, the state that we have in white America, when that alliance is broken between Black Americans, white Americans, the oppressor and the oppressed, who has who has the most equity to become the conqueror? Have we positioned ourselves to even be in, like that's the issue. We can fight, we can push for laws, we can protest all day long, but here's the issue. Let's just say we protested in the streets every day for 100 days. You know what I'm saying? Basically, like this summer, right? And let's just say Black people decided not to go to work for 100 days straight, and we just protested. Let's say we finally brought down the empire because you cannot work without us. None of your systems work without us. Then what? What's next? And that's the issue. We don't have a plan for how we move forward because we're not really using those strategies and we're not activating those plans within our own communities right now.
Well, so that what that means is, Cam, it sounds like, so I mean, honestly, what you're saying is actually it brings you back to the notion of you do have to kind of work within the structure, right? Because in order to secure those resources and secure that kind of that even within our community, so if you're talking about economics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we still live and breathe within a country that focuses and its priorities on capitalism. So
Mm-hmm.
um, we have to embrace certain capitalistic principles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't just sit here and not function within those. We can't refuse to accept those principles. We have to kind of embrace them at some point. But I think what you have to do is you have to embrace them from a black nationalist or Afrocentric
Yes.
perspective, right? So rather than utilizing kind of the Eurocentric approach, we have to do it in a way that says, okay, I'm going to reinvest this money back through the community, or at a minimum, I'm gonna just build up my own family line, right? So even if you're in a position where it's like, okay, I'm not at the place where I'm just gonna, recycle it back through everybody else, but at least keep it within your own community, right?
Yes.
Um,
And that's the part I always say we don't do a good job at. And
We do it at all?
well, some that's the
right,
thing. It's in pockets. The problem is
right.
it's not national enough where you can actually use it and view the statistics. It's in pockets. It's a little spot over here in Chicago. It's a little spot
Hmm.
over here in Baltimore. A little spot over
Mhm.
here in Little Rock, Arkansas. There's pockets of
Hmm.
it where there's no actual where what old folks used to sit there and say there's no actual black leader, which we don't need a black leader to do this. I'm saying like
Right.
there's so where I was going with it just within the post, and like I said, I come from a centrist type ideology because I believe the center is where the balance is. If you go out too far left and you go out too far right, you're going to tip and fall. The branch is either going to
Hmm.
break. So you have to get where there's balance, and that's usually in the center. But I know how that can be detrimental for us because the time that needs to be taken for that approach to work is a lot of time. So I play chess a lot. So I'm thinking like 10, 12 moves ahead, but a chess game is very long compared to checkers. And a lot of people play checkers. And no one teaches
It's because they
the
tired of playing chess.
well, I go shit. A lot of them,
shit,
but that's what I'm
shit. The
saying.
game,
Not
the game's gone on so fucking long. You're like, fuck, it's time.
I know, but that's the game that white folks played so well. That's the thing. My whole point is why don't we play the game not to play their game, utilize
But to
rules
win.
of their games to win, and to do that it's going to be frustrating and it's going to be what's the best word for it? It's going to be uncomfortable to do it. It's going to be uncomfortable. Where we fall is if
And,
shit get too uncomfortable, we out
I
because
mean,
we
but
got
let's be
enough
real.
head.
How much more uncomfortable can it be than just being black in America? I mean,
Oh,
like it ain't that fucking uncomfortable. I mean, I
it could
don't
be
think.
I'm saying truthfully, it could be very uncomfortable. Like
I don't
if
know how
white folks got
uncomfortable.
their thumb on your neck,
Yeah, but I
it
don't.
can get comfortable. It can get
Shit,
uncomfortable when they got
they
their thumb and their foot.
they
See,
they got both on our necks already.
but that's my point. That it can they the way we're playing the game right now, they're still on top. So you can try to wiggle your way around all you want. If you don't know the damn move to get up out the hold, you can't get up out the hold. So I'm saying learn the fucking move to get up out the hold. We don't
Well,
do
that's
that
the
part.
no. And I'm gonna push back just a little bit because when I talk to my black moderates, my black elite, even those who are rooted in community work, um, we know the game. We know the strategies. We know what's happening, but we won't activate. We won't work within our own knowledge. And so I'm going to say something that your listeners are probably like, oh, for real? Nobody wants to hear this, but I mean it in a different context. We're lazy. We've gotten lazy. It doesn't mean we won't work. We
Mhm.
won't work for
No,
us
I
because
get what
it's
you're saying. Yeah.
easier and more convenient for us to let them lay the groundwork and tell us what to do and how to move versus pushing against that and possibly having to make not even bad, but some sacrifices.
Or
So you
choices
have
generally.
now I don't have a master's degree. And there's a reason why I don't have a master's degree. And some of it is arrogance. I'm like, I don't actually need a master's degree because I've been blessed enough to do what I needed to do without one instead of going into debt, which I'm already into debt because my degree does not pay for my actual college loans. So I had to be clever and learn how to work around in order to serve my purpose and do my work. But you have someone like me who believes in community, who believes in our people, who I'm gonna just I'm gonna just pat myself. I'm a strategist. That is one of my strengths, but I don't get to sit at the table because I'm not willing to be complicit. I'm not willing to just accept the status quo. And they know that about me. And when you live in a community as small as mine, trust me, my name is being ran all up and through, which affects my ability to get a job because there are gatekeepers. And so we don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to make that sacrifice of losing potential income, losing our reputation because we're too radical. We want to play to the middle and we want to placate them so that we continue to have our positions and our titles because we worked hard for that. But that's laziness, in my opinion.
No, I agree. So, I mean, and you actually kind of hit on something. Greg had mentioned something earlier, and I meant to kind of bring it up. But what it really is, and walk with me for a little bit. There's a level of personal responsibility, right? So, for instance, I'll give you an example. Like, and this is just it's my bailiwick. This is my lane. I like to travel in when I talk about police, right? Policing, and you talk about police reform. So when I talk to people about abolishing police, I start, bougie niggas start looking at me like, oh shit, what you mean no police? Who gonna protect me from these niggas? Like, you know what I'm saying? So,
Mhm.
like that's what they ultimately concerned about. But in reality, and when we really start to dig in and unpack the conversation and the idea around getting rid of police in the black communities, what you really start finding is what we're talking about taking on more responsibility, because once you start taking police out of the community, now we have to start having some real conversations about
Yes.
how we address some of the shit that exists within our community, because we're not going to nobody's sitting here with their head in the sand like, oh, there's no crime and there's no issues in the black community. What we're saying is police aren't doing anything to help us solve those problems. So so the byproduct of getting rid of policing in the black community means that now we're forced to actually deal with our problems and actually find real solutions.
Yes.
And there's a level of personal accountability personal responsibility that we actually have to go through. So the reality is, with that particular situation, you're forced to help yourself, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're talking about with a lot of these solutions. A lot of these solutions require, when you talk about recycling money back through the neighborhood or the community, there is a level of sacrifice and there is a level of not relying on the safety net of white supremacy, right? Because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
folks, you're right, they make their money off of this system. But there's also an opportunity right now, right? Because one of the things I found, I worked in a pretty white firm, a lily white firm, when I first started off. I was the only black attorney for a long time. And I was able to navigate it, and people were always interested how I was able to navigate it while maintaining my blackness. Both of y'all know me. I've been this way for a while, and I didn't compromise it while I was at the firm. Now I left because I knew I'd probably run my course on this path that I was taking, and I was able to move into a lane where now I can be unapologetically myself and still earn a living, right?
Yes.
So, but I also understand everybody can't do that. But what I did find is, even within that context, there is a way to maintain, just from a perspective of maintaining your identity and who you are. You can do it. It's just there's a way to do it. And I couldn't necessarily. Each industry is different, right?
Yes.
Each industry is different how you go about doing it, how to accomplishing that. But I guess the overall point was to your point, Ken. Where you're talking about basically we lazy. Those are facts because a lot of these solutions mean that we have to start helping ourselves.
Yep.
It means that
Mm.
we're no longer going to be under the umbrella of, okay, well, these white folks about to give me this money, or they're going to give me this grant, or they're going to pay this check, or they're going to do this. I mean, you start thinking about things like, as black folks, I think there's a town in Georgia outside Atlanta. There's a group of black folks who bought some land down there, and they were
Yep.
talking about basically forming their own town so they wouldn't be subject to the law enforcement down there and the city that they lived. I don't know if it was Atlanta or not. It could have been another city in Georgia, but the point was they were going to buy their own land and then create their own town. Now, we've seen how that shit works out before.
Yeah.
But whether it be Black Wall Street or wherever else. If you do too well, white folks start looking at you like, oh fuck, we go burn that shit down. So
Mhm.
part of that means we got to be more prepared, and that leads us into our Second Amendment conversation that me and Greg always have about making sure we actually prepared.
Yep.
Yes.
Um, but I think as a conversation we actually need to have that we need to be really honest with ourselves of what freedom actually means.
Yes.
Because freedom doesn't necessarily mean that okay, you just get access to all this shit and you good. Freedom means that now you got to take on responsibility for all this shit yourself, and you got to be okay with that if you truly want to be free, right?
Exactly. So emancipation, right? You're
Right.
you're a lawyer, so you're familiar with minors being emancipated.
Sure.
But once you are emancipated,
You
that
are
means that you are on your own.
responsible for
You're
yourself.
not getting child support, you're not getting a check.
Right.
You got to figure it out for yourself. And
Right.
that's what we're afraid to do, but all of it is rooted in our history, and this is where I think I get a little bit frustrated because I'm not going to say I'm the most um well read in terms of I can't tell you I've read 100 books on Black history, but I can skim some stuff, and the way my brain works, if I just read just a little bit,
Mhm.
it still gives me more than not reading at all. And
Right.
so what I hear are a lot of the people we consider leaders and our political leaders, and even those who have decided to be, the voice of Black people, you can hear that you really don't understand our history. And this is why we continue to repeat this same cycle, because number one, the blueprint was already given to us by the Honorable Marcus Josiah Garvey. Let's start there. He told us how to build our own economic system and capitalistic system within this system, and he was rejected. Malcolm X told us what to do,
Right.
and he was rejected. We always reject our own, and then we leave them to become a martyr because we don't embrace them, we don't surround them, we don't protect them, we call them names. So the blueprint was already given to us, but that the psychology behind it lends itself to being, seriously, people say it, but I'm going to say it on slaves.
Hmm.
So when you think about Harriet Tubman, her biggest barrier to freeing other enslaved Black folk was the fact that they felt more safe with their masters than than the unknown that awaited them. I don't know how I'm going to eat. I don't know where I'm going to lay my head. I could get captured. So there was so much fear that they found comfort in being a slave. And I think
Mhm.
here 400 years later, we still find comfort in being slaves, and nobody wants to hear that. People was pissed off because Kanye said it, but if you really listen and you know your history, then you know he wasn't really trying to disrespect the ancestors. What he's saying is we've been here before. When are you going to change your mind? When are you going to choose to do something different? Because you do have that choice. It may not be comfortable, but you do have a choice to do something different.
Well, yeah, it's just like I mean, it's the classic question when you talk about you work for somebody or you work for yourself, right? So I mean, would you rather get a consistent paycheck or just work hard for yourself and not really know where that money is going to come from? And most people that end up working for themselves, there's a level of freedom, and I think sometimes you can utilize both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing it smart, you utilize one to create a safety net so you can start the other, right? And you do
Exactly.
those
And
things simultaneously.
I agree with you. We can navigate. So I'm not real good at navigating, but that's just a personality deficit because I'm so passionate and I'm learning to pull back a little, and just, focus on the goal and not necessarily the here and now and what needs to be said here and now, but it can be done for the simple fact that in our white culture, our Eurocentric centered workplaces, you're not gonna walk up to your boss and he's like, "Hey, I'm a member of the KKK." You know what I'm saying? They know how to navigate this world where they know racism is not acceptable, but they do so by what? Getting rid of a top level black executive and replacing them with a
Right.
white one that's less qualified.
Well, yeah,
Um,
it's not blatant in your face. It's strategic, and they
exactly.
they use other pretext to say, okay, this is the reason why I'm doing something. Which is why,
Exactly.
which is why you have somebody like, you talk about the SCOTUS. This is kind of off subject, but the SCOTUS nominee, the Supreme Court nominee, somebody who's just like, hey, I just interpret the laws as they're written, and that's it. It's easy for white folks to say, I just interpret laws as they're written, because when laws become racially neutral and facially neutral on their face, it's easy to say, well, there's nothing wrong with this law. It doesn't say that black people ain't shit. So you good.
Right.
Like, what's the problem?
Technically, yeah.
Right. I mean, but that's how they.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the long and short of it. Like when they talk about laws, and they talk about, well, it has to be facially neutral and it can't be, racially discriminatory or whatever discriminatory on its face. Nobody's writing laws anymore that says black folks can't drink out of this water fountain. Like nobody's doing that anymore.
Right.
Like this shit is way more nuanced. But I think we do find ourselves at an inflection point where within the next, decade or two, that this country is going to be more brown than it's going to be white, and that's why. And that when you talk about working within the system, there's certain things we need to do within the system as far as that's concerned, in order to prepare the table to be able to demand or take over seats at the table. Because, like we talked about this before, Greg, talk about like stand your ground legislation, right? Like
Hmm.
the reason why you start to see an influx of stand your ground legislation is old white guys are like, shit, we about to be the minority in about 2 decades. Now we need
Hmm.
to figure out a way to maintain control on all this shit when we're the minority,
Right.
right? Because if we're out right now, we just outnumber motherfuckers, so they don't give a fuck. But they're seeing the writing on the wall, so they're like, okay, we need to be able to do shit that allows us to maintain this power when we're a minority. Therefore, just something as fundamental as being able to shoot a motherfucker on the sidewalk out in the street and making it legal. That's basically what they're doing, because they're like, okay, shit, now I can kind of just do what I need to do just out here generally, rather than just only be able to do shit in my home. But like little things like that are strategies on
Hmm.
maintaining control and power when you're in the minority. So that means as a community, it's not enough just for us to be like, well, let's just see what happens here. We do need to be more strategic in, how we interact with just the legislative system, whether that be, our local city commissions or
Yeah.
whatever it may be, the different school boards, because you can't just sit back and not do anything. Which is why,
Sure.
within the context of this election, I 100% understand folks feeling about Biden and Harris and the ticket. I've made the conscious decision that I think strategically it's the best decision at this point in time. It's not something I'm super excited about, and which is why you're not going to see me out here caping super hard for Joe Biden or anybody else. Which is why I don't understand these black folks who, I mean, they go in to make sure that you do not disrespect old Uncle Joe. Like,
Yes.
I mean, it's. I mean, it's actually pretty amazing. I mean, we talked about it within the context of the Ice Cube conversation and
Hmm.
all this other stuff. But I mean, just that just that one example of, yeah, people were so pissed at Ice Cube for simply having a conversation with Trump's whoever, his son-in-law or whoever the fuck he talked to, just to tell them about his plan. He never mind the fact that he never endorsed anybody, nor did he ever say he was on anybody's team. He just basically said, I'll talk to whoever is trying to do something for black folks, and I'm going to do whatever I can to do to stack the deck on either side. He simply just met with somebody for a few hours. Meanwhile, the candidate that y'all love the best is like the Republicans that y'all hate so much. He's like, yeah, I'm going to put some of them in my cabinet. Like, think about that for a second. Like, it's so bad now that like folks are so focused on just getting Trump out that they're doing like the mental gymnastics that they're doing is pretty fucking bananas. Like, you have folks out here who are, you know, they're people are legitimately trying to tell me how great of a governor John Kasich was here in Ohio. Right. That's the funniest shit to me that I've ever seen. Like, because Trump is so bad,
Hmm.
and they're so intent on just getting him out of there. And they're like, oh, I would, what I would give to have John. I would vote for John Kasich. I'm like, you do remember how bad this shit was when this motherfucker was the governor of the state, don't you? Like, you remember
Right.
the shit that was going on.
Now,
But
I'll be honest. I'm like, let me look at Mitt Romney's history because he's the only one who had the balls to vote, for Trump's impeachment. Let's start there.
well,
And
well, yeah,
even
man,
when he was with the Bush administration, he he's the reason for the surprise stimulus package that we
right,
received. And so, when we're looking at just solely party lines, then of course I'm going to be like, forget this or that. But
right.
when you start looking at what a person, their history and their elected positions and what they have accomplished, and then you start kind of digging into who they are, I ain't gonna hold you up. I was like, well, maybe Trump will stay sick enough that they're gonna have to replace his the
You,
Republicans candidate, and I'm
yeah,
hoping it might be Mitt Romney.
you didn't hear the
Um,
episode like because we were talking about like, look, shit. Everybody else is sending out prayers and shit. I'm like, fuck, that, I ain't sending no prayers for
He
that
ain't
shit.
saying a
Motherfucker.
fucking prayer.
I ain't
not a
sending a
one.
positive thought over there. I'm just gonna sit back and let that shit happen the way it's supposed to happen.
It
Well, when we
And
is
talk
what it
about
is.
strategy,
uh,
and I mean, and so not to, but when we talk about strategy, there's a thing that, when we look at strategy, we're always talking about what's pragmatic. We're looking at logistics, we're looking at logic, and it's all basically science and data and, understanding systems. But one thing that we really never talk about is the spiritual. So, like the Black community being so entrenched in the Christian church, um
It's
that has been
detrimental.
weaponized against us. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
it's
saying?
detrimental.
you've activated Greg.
So let's
And
just call this what this
Five,
is.
4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, the
Lift off.
Black church. Let's just go right here and talk about this dang on thing. And like I said, I got a whole episode coming. When I say I got a whole episode coming, I have a whole episode coming on the Black church. The Black church right now, it is detrimental for us to go ahead and make it the way we need to make it. I said it. You can write it down. You can take a picture. I don't give a fuck. You can come after me if you want to. All
yeah,
pastors, deacons, whatever you want to damn do. Right now, you are part of a system that was not designed for you to actually participate in. And you are sitting there worshiping a God that you did not know until they came over and basically dropped a Bible in your hand and took your land from underneath you,
yeah,
put you on a boat, shipped you all around the damn world, dropped you off in every freaking little spot you could possibly get. And what they did was they further indoctrinated you and sat there and said, Jesus will save you. Jesus is the reason for the season. Jesus, go to him and God, and everything will be all right. You are not of this world. You're just passing through it.
oh, and don't
Yes.
forget, Jesus said to obey your master, so don't forget that part.
Well, yes. So here's the problem. So I'm glad you brought that up. Here's the fucking problem. This is why we can't sit here and like you said, we have the strategy and we understand the game. This is why, because there's a small part of us that sits there and will obey the invisible man in the sky
Yeah,
and wait
and
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 wait
it's
and
not,
wait.
and I'm not here to. My family is 100% Kojic Pentecostal Baptist, so
Oh
I'm
no,
I'm
yeah. Let's not get it twisted. For all you people who sitting there like, God damn, Greg, I didn't think. Look, I do believe there's an entity that created
Like, this nigga's an
everything.
atheist.
Right? No, I
He's
believe
a
there's an
fucking
entity
Scientologist.
that created this damn world. I just don't believe God is as petty as you make him out to be.
there
You
we
sit
go.
there and project human emotion, human things onto an entity that created everything. That is the dumbest fucking thing that I ever think. God can do this and he can't do that. How? If you created everything, that means you can do everything. Why are you
Ex-
Well,
limiting God? But I will
and look,
digress.
well, you can continue to digress, but to interrupt your rant a little bit, what's even more interesting on that conversation is if God created everything, then how do you believe there's a devil working against him to the point that he didn't control or create that devil or whatever you're talking about? I
If
mean,
it's his will
like,
How
and
do you
all,
validate
yeah,
this?
see that? That's the
right.
other thing.
So
That's the other
so
flip side.
right. So yeah, that's a deeper conversation. Like I'm ready
Well,
for that episode too.
I'm
But
telling
where
you,
where
we gonna have it.
and where I'm going with that
right, right,
is, so right now we're supposed to be woke. And woke is supposed to mean that you have higher consciousness and awareness. Well, my whole thing is your higher consciousness and awareness is rooted in your God self. And so, if you're not connecting those two, this is why we keep working against ourselves. This is why we're weaponizing
right,
our ancestors
right,
right
right,
now, as opposed to really understanding how our ancestors lived, why they lived, and then thus how they died. So they didn't run out the house and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this so I can die." No, they were living so that you could be here, that my black ass could be here,
right.
that my kid could be here. That is what they were living for. So we have to continue to carry that torch and we have to understand. But until we center ourselves, and again, it doesn't have to be fully, but we have to center ourselves on stop looking at this external version of God who has been weaponized against us, this external version of Jesus that has been weaponized against us, and really truly seek that truth within, because
Right.
this is our guiding system.
Right.
This is how we make decisions and choices. If you're going to go pray, who are you praying to and what answers are you looking for? Because you're supposed to pray and listen. So when you're listening, who do you hear?
Well,
And if we know that DNA, our ancestral DNA is real. No offense to anybody, but I won't date a white man. And I'm like, I'm quite sure that maybe in my ancestral DNA, one of my ancestors was raped, because it is not necessarily me saying I don't find white men attractive or whatever. There's just something inside of me that says no. You know what I'm saying? That might not be for everybody, but that's for me. And to me, that means that somewhere along that my line, we know about trauma. We know about generational trauma. So why do we separate the two? But I think we separate the two because of the black church, and politicians leverage the black church to rape the black community over and over
well,
and
you,
over
you bring up a
again.
good point though. Like, so within the
Mhm.
context of religion and just the church, when you don't seek actual honesty and truth in your spiritual relationship or your religion, it's going to be almost impossible for you to be able to decipher truth and honesty when it comes to anything else, right?
Yeah.
Because your spiritual relationship is the single most intimate relationship you will ever have with anything, right?
Mhm.
So within that context, if you simply just blindly accept what somebody's telling you without any question or have any verification, or your church has told you that you can't know everything for sure in this life as you live here, then you're already you're working behind the eight ball already. That means you're already subject to manipulation, because at a cellular level at that point, you've now just accepted whatever truth somebody has told you on something as intimate as your spirituality. So
Mm.
you know and so that's some real talk. As you were saying that, Cam, I was like, that makes perfect sense as far as just how people treat their spiritual selves and how it manifests itself when it comes to the world, right?
Yeah.
And what you typically find is um, people who talk in a fashion that's closer to an individual who's free tend to have had some sort of spiritual awakening. So, case in point, like Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
Like Malcolm, very clearly and very, whether you read his autobiography, you read his writings or his speeches,
Mhm.
it is very clear he had a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's no doubt about that, and those spiritual awakenings they happen across religion,
Yes.
and
And it actually happens across race, as we
right,
saw, as evidence at towards the end of his life, because we're ever evolving people. And that's what's crazy to me. If we're always evolving, then how is it that as a collective we haven't evolved yet? you know? So everything comes with evolution, and that means, we have to surrender a certain part of ourselves, and go within, and go deeper. And then when we start going within, then it impacts how we raise our children, and how we govern our households, and then that turns into how we govern our community space. And then we'll start voting, because I'm not I'm not saying forget the voting system. Yes, I see all the flaws, but I still feel it's like my civic duty to cast my vote if I do want to see anything changed,
Right.
right? Um, but with that being said, now I can make better decisions about who I'm voting for, because I'm more in tune with what our needs are, and to carry and continue to carry the torch. So there are so many cliches that we use. I'm a part of a sorority, and you know what I'm saying, there are things there are principles that are within my sorority that lends itself to really constantly being that bridge in the community, and moving forward and carrying ourselves forward. Well, you've disconnected yourself from your ancestors. Right now it's a good cliche phrase, but as Black people, we've disconnected ourselves to their struggle for real. We really don't understand what their survival looked like, and the things that they had to do. So even sometimes we'll be like, don't mess with me. I'm not my ancestors, baby. I am my ancestors. And that's why you don't want to mess with me, because I came back here to fulfill a work that they couldn't complete.
Right.
Well, and that's supposed to be what's supposed to happen, but like you said, they don't feel connected to it. And truthfully, I mean, that's another. I hate to point it out as that's another flaw, but that was my whole point. There is so much to this game that we tend not to. It's almost like when you get a new toy back in the day, fucking like mousetrap and shit, and you open up that Milton Bradley
Oh
box
shit.
and you want to fucking play with that shit. But
Mousetrap.
hell yeah, man,
Greg is forever giving y'all some old ass examples.
you play that shit. You got this 25-page booklet of fucking instructions, and what the fuck you do is
Like, you remember Operation?
you skim
No.
that motherfucker. You
Yes.
skim it just to see how to put the goddamn shit together, just so you can play it. And
Yeah.
that's what people do very well. That's what Black people do very well. We skim shit, we get it going, and then we move on. We don't actually take the time to sit there and read the whole fucking shit. Truthfully,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of people that's sitting there going, I ain't fucking with that ancestor.com. That's how they gonna trap you and know all your information. Well, if you look at ancestor.com, and you don't have to go to that shit. You can go to many. There's folks that does genealogy that's all Black. You can go to
Yeah.
them if you can get your genealogy. But if you got your
Yeah.
genealogy and figure out who the fuck you are, you could probably curb some of these goddamn pre-existing conditions that you might have well before
Yeah.
it becomes a fucking problem. Therefore, you won't need to sit there and be on medication and be on and worry about healthcare to the degree in which we worry about healthcare versus white folks worrying about healthcare. That's why they can go all the way to about 50, 55 and eat every hamburger in the world and have high cholesterol in the world, and it doesn't fucking affect them. And yet and still we can't eat 1 gram of fucking salt. If you learn where you come from and who your
Yeah.
people are, you can sit there and make a better assessment. Hence why that's the type of stuff I'm talking about when I say learn to play the game. Truthfully, I saw the movie before I read the book, but that's usually what happens in life in general. Most people see a movie before they read the goddamn book. I didn't even know it was a book till I saw the movie. But anyway, long time, I was about 8, 9 years old, saw Spook Who Sat by the Door. That's my shit. Spook
Yeah.
Who Sat by the Door is how I think. That's how I process shit. I'm like, infiltrate, get all the fucking knowledge directly from the source, and then use that shit against them. That's how I think. I think so. When I bring up my point, I want to come from there because I don't think we have tried it. I guess tried it enough. We've tried a lot of things, but I don't think we've
Yeah.
tried that enough to sit there and get a proper assessment and say we got enough data to say, well, that shit didn't work. I think
Well,
I think that
but
shit does kind of work.
I think you got to be careful though, because what you're talking about, and I get what you're saying. I think there's a definitely a value to understanding your enemy, so to speak, right? So
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
value to understanding the system in which you live. At the same time, black folks need to understand that some of the shit that these white folks do isn't something that's going to work for us because we're not that Machiavellian or
Yeah.
and I mean, not that we can't be that strategic, but it's not it's not something that how can I put this? It just
It's not
doesn't.
natural.
Well, it doesn't jive with historically who we are. You know, when Cam talks about our ancestors and our ancestral DNA, it doesn't necessarily jive with that. So, you know, we have to develop different strategies, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
For instance, I'll give you an example. Like we primarily come from Africa, and so a lot of times the conversation in our communities all the time is that our family, and Cam, you and I were just talking about this right before we got on,
Mhm.
this idea of single parent, households, and primarily, women raising kids, right? But
Mhm.
no fathers around, right? So it becomes this criticism where black folks almost take this perspective that they're ashamed of what it is, and why don't we have more, we don't have too many more two-parent households and all this type of shit. We start talking about it within the context of it as a deficiency,
Yeah.
which, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a benefit to having both parents around. I don't want people to think that I'm advocating for single parent households. That being said, what's not understood at times is in African culture is matrifocal, right?
Yeah.
So what that means is, and see people, and when they hear matrifocal, niggas start like, "What you mean matrifocal? You mean?" But what matrifocal means is that it means that the woman was the focus of the household. And what
Yeah.
that means is it means that the woman was in charge of socializing the children and
Mhm.
she was in charge of making sure the household was together. But in Africa, the man still went out, killed the animals, killed the food, protected the family, did all that type of shit, and brought it back. But he still had a role. He still had a significant role, obviously, in directing which way the children went as far as how they were raised. But
Yeah.
African culture is very matrifocal. So it's not a surprise. Now, obviously, our families were broken up whenever we came over here, which is why you see some of the shit that you see right now, but strategically. But if we understood that, well, wait a minute, some of the stuff we see within our community is probably just an outgrowth of that spiritual and that DNA, so to
Mhm.
speak,
Hmm.
that of who we are. Like that may not necessarily be a bad thing. And more
Yeah.
importantly, if we understand how this shit works, we utilize it to our strength and to our advantage, right? And
Yes.
and we start understanding, okay, look, no, it's not an indictment on manhood or masculinity, or it's not we're not sitting here saying that it's okay as a black man just not to be involved with your kids or take care of your family, which I think is overstated at times. But to understand that the culture in which we come from historically was a mother focused
Yeah.
family structure, right? So and so those type of things, understanding where we come from, back to your point, Greg, like I get the idea of infiltrating and kind of understanding where you're coming from, but I don't always believe that the same strategies that they have used will work for us.
Agreed.
And I can see that. I can see that the same way. They shampoo can't work on our heads, and our shampoo can't work on their heads. I get that part. I'm just saying I don't believe that that has been tried enough to even come to that conclusion on a global, like a national global scale. I keep saying global because I mean,
Well,
hands
I mean,
down
let's play
across
it
the
out.
world.
Let's play it out. What do you mean? Because like, what do you mean? So I mean, because there's been plenty of folks who've been successful navigating these systems, and they made their money, and they've been able to kind of achieve the upper mobility that they need, whether it be like Robert Smith or who, whatever other black folks with significant amount of capital or money that they have. Like, how does that look from your perspective? Like when you say infiltrate, utilizing whatever you find out to successfully kind of build up our communities. I mean, what are you talking about when you say that?
literally literally actually infiltrating and utilizing to the best of our abilities. Like you mentioned Robert Smith. Now, Robert Smith is I mean, hella five philanthropist. I take nothing away. I take nothing away from him. But if you have a boatload of Robert Smith, well, you don't have a boatload, but let's say you got 10 Robert Smiths. Those 10 Robert Smiths make up a council. I don't give a shit, whatever you want to call them. They make up a council, say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna to the point of that example that you had earlier, we're gonna just buy up all this land and dumb part of South Dakota, whatever. We'll buy up all
Mhm.
this land and we're gonna call this Blacktown. These names are just coming out the top of my head right now. And
Black out.
yeah, we're gonna call it
Blacktown.
Blacktown. Yeah, and
We're
we
gonna call it Niggerville.
yeah, yeah. So we're gonna do this, and we're gonna take our money that we got from them and working hard, and we're gonna sit there and say, here's our zone, here's what it is, this is the damn
Yeah.
city, here's our government, let's try it. That's what I'm talking about versus I'm going to give money to make sure that there are more people like me to work within the system. I'm saying take that fucking money because there's a lot of it, and he has a lot of it. Take that fucking money and sit there and create your own space.
Right. And
So Randall, I think it's Randall Robinson. He's an ancestor now, but he wrote the debt to black to, the debt America owes to blacks. And he had an interview in 2013, and I just became aware. So I'm not acting like this was something I've had in my pocket, but it was powerful because he said something. He said, there was a time where when we were fighting together, um, i.e., the civil rights movement, we were fighting for the rights of all of us. But at some point, we only started fighting for some of us.
right.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I agree that a lot of our black elite and our black wealthy want to focus on making a whole bunch of them, but we know that that's not realistic. We know that we need kids who are in trades. We need, but so my whole thing is, I could care less. I know it's weird, but but I could care less about your scholarship if you're not helping ensure that their foundational education is solid enough for them to survive in a higher institution of education. So really, you're rewarding college students, which is cool. You're rewarding them
Right.
for completing the course, but if those kids didn't go to Morehouse, if those kids didn't go to a HBCU and they went to a PWI, how do they stack up against their contemporaries? And how, how successful are they? I graduated with it was not my finest moment. It wasn't like no, but it was
Mm-hmm.
still thinking that I was in the top 10% of my high school class and then getting to Wright State University and having to test into remedial classes, what does that do to your confidence?
Mm-hmm.
Not going into a classroom prepared with your white peers. How does that make you feel? How do you internalize that? So we do need to focus on the infrastructure that builds our children up in order to go in a different directions. We need mechanics. We
Mm-hmm.
need graphic art designers. We need cosmic, we need all of that. We don't just need a whole bunch of degreed niggas. We just don't.
Well,
Well, I think
yeah.
you're starting to see a shift away from telling people they just need to go to college, because candidly, I mean, so don't get me wrong. Having gone to college, I've seen the benefit of it, what it meant to me socially, intellectually,
And
academically.
we need you,
Uh,
Robert. So don't let me take away from
Yeah, but it
that.
ain't
no,
for
what?
everybody.
But
Yeah.
it's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, and it also there's also even a strategy to say that it may not be the best choice depending on what it is that you want to do. Like if you have a degree, so for instance, I became a lawyer, which means that I needed all these degrees in order to get certified and licensed to be able to practice law,
Yeah.
in whatever state I needed to go into. Some folks, like if there's an area that you like that ultimately going to college ain't really doing much to advance that, don't waste the money or the time unless you can go in school for free. Like it just doesn't make sense. But I
Exactly.
think I think
Exactly.
at its core, Cam, what you're talking about is this notion of, you know, everybody's not gonna necessarily rise to the top, right? It's not
Mhm.
gonna happen. But I think fundamentally and practically, what I often talk about is the need to have at least some type of safety net, right?
Yeah.
At a minimum, folks should be able to live with a certain level of dignity and be able to, pay
Yes.
their bills
Mhm.
and just take care of their families. And
Yes.
there's no reason why we can't have a society or a country like that where folks can just live respectfully. Not they don't have to. They're not living way beyond their means. They're not
Yes.
out here balling out of control. They're not living in 10,000 square foot homes. Like,
Hmm.
they just go to work. They can earn a living. They can send their kids to college if they want to,
Yep.
or not. And food's on the table every day.
My
That's not
mother
a
was a
that's
single
not
mother of two, and
right.
she worked for the post office, and we grew up middle class.
Right.
I mean, it's very simple, you know. And so, no, we don't need all of that to live with dignity. I agree.
But you know, I think what the first step, and I've had this conversation before, is you know the first thing you sometimes you want to do is you want to sit and you feel like, okay, we need to plan, right? Um, we need to figure out, but it's hard to even get folks to sit down and, like, who do you get to sit down and talk about? Okay, what are the issues as a community we need to put on what we call Black agenda, right? So Cube tried the shit, like he threw some shit together, and let me backtrack off that. I don't want to see because he didn't just throw it together because all these motherfuckers who are out here talking about him like he just sat down in his basement and while he was
Wrote this shit
writing
out.
Friday 4, he was like, "Oh, let me do the Black Contract with America," and he just came up with some shit. No, he worked with some real scholars and some real experts to develop some shit that was cogent and made a lot of fucking sense, right?
Hmm.
Mhm.
So these black folks who are out here talking shit about, yeah, that Ice Cube shit really bothered me. Like, the more I heard and the more shit that came out, it just really upset me because black folks will go in on you really quick
Yeah.
and not give a fuck for no reason and not even really fully heard the shit. Meanwhile, you'll accept whatever this white man tells you as soon as he
Yes.
tells you. So,
Well,
but
because they get hurt real. They're sensitive to what they feel as though you're attacking their ideologies. They get real sensitive real quick.
To me, that equals guilt. You know, you dropped the ball, period.
Well, yeah, that equals guilt,
We
and
shouldn't have to depend on an Ice Cube to come up with a plan for Black America.
right,
exactly,
right, right. Oh,
exactly.
and that's one of the things I brought up. I'm like, look, so then where was the plan that we came up with all these other years with all these other Democratic nominees? And so, and don't get me wrong, I know folks are doing stuff. So I'm not gonna sit here and act like folks
Yeah.
aren't doing anything. I'm not gonna act like this is whatever Ice Cube put up there is not the first time anybody's necessarily talked about,
Yeah.
reallocation of wealth. But um,
It's a,
there's
which is
got
a dirty word for white folks right now. That
well,
phrase
yeah, that's
is
why.
dirty
I
as
mean, but
hell. Yeah,
so
But it only comes up during an election season.
right.
These conversations literally are only sparked at a particular time because where's the grassroots effort? I shouldn't have to depend on a celebrity. I'm from, and that's what I on one of my posts. I'm like, I'm from Dayton, Ohio. There are no ice cubes here. This is not LA. There are no killer mics here. Therefore, why is it that we who at one point was thriving in this community, why is it so hard for us to get ahead when we have been led by Black politicians
sure,
for 20, 30 years?
well,
So
because
why is there such a divestment in the Black
sure,
community, when this we've had several Black mayors, you know, we've had a slew of Black commissioners. So what is the trick? Like, I don't, but if Ice Cube were to come to town and said, let's have a town hall or a think tank,
Mhm.
I would go because now we're having some type of meeting of the minds, but this really doesn't happen in small communities like ours.
well, and Cam, I know that community well. I mean, the reality is, it's something you talked about very early on, and this goes back to this notion of how do you operate within the system, because you have black politicians who have an investment in making sure that they just maintain the status quo, right? So, um, and what that means is for years, as long as they're doing all right, they're good, right? So,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, and that's basically how some of these parties work. You know, that's how the Democratic parties work. That's how probably the Republican Party works for the few lost black folks that are in that particular community. They basically give certain people the perks and the success that they need in order to kind of navigate this thing and kind of perpetuate the system
Hmm.
indefinitely, and
Hmm.
then they forget about the folks who really need it the most. Because what we don't talk about, even within the black community, is this dynamic and this pushback as far from a class perspective, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I mean, so you got bougie black folks who basically want to maintain they want to maintain not even just their economic position, they want to maintain their status,
Yes.
right? I mean, whether it be they Jack and Jill, they want to make sure they go to, or whatever it is, they want to make sure they remain the quote unquote talented tenth of the community, right?
Yes.
You know how many people I run into that want to perpetuate the talented tenth idea, right?
Trust me.
And
I
and I'm
live here. I know.
and I'm gonna be like, first of all,
And
who
that's the
told you you
thing.
were the talented tenth?
Dealing with the microaggressions with, white coworkers over my professional years,
Sure.
nothing did as much damage to me as working under black leadership
Mm,
and realizing that those black leaders were not about the advancement of black people. And I'm like, oh, even being told, and I love her, but one of my former directors said, well, I don't want to show you any favoritism because they'll think I'm showing you favoritism. But meanwhile, you're taking a young white Catholic co-worker who works 5 hours a week. You've given her a scholarship to go to nursing school. So is that the trade-off?
Right.
right. Well, and so I mean, those are the challenges we have. Like so, and that's I think the the idea of what Cube was talking about, as far as not putting all our eggs in one basket and kind of
Yeah,
playing the middle.
yeah.
There's a value in that, right? Because it's a strategic conversation you start having. So I mean, like I've told people, like, look, I'm gonna vote Biden Harris here just because I think it makes the most sense, even from a Supreme Court nomination perspective moving forward, assuming there's even a chance for that now moving forward. But after this election, the first thing black folks should be doing is developing whatever agenda they need to have, and then start developing the kind of candidates we want, or start.
I agree with that. And I think again, I think it's there's multi levels, layers to it.
Sure, we can walk and
Not
chew gum at the
everybody's
same
going to
time.
be engaged in the political game right now.
Sure,
I saw some numbers earlier today, and we've more than quadrupled the number of voters between the ages of 18
right.
and 29
I saw that too.
since the last. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm like, that's great, but these are also the same. These are the same voters who wanted Bernie, right?
Right.
So all of the get out and vote, I've never seen anything like it in my whole entire existence.
Mhm.
But it's working, right? But what do we get after the fact? And so a lot of those voters, including opening up voting to ex felons, which they
Mhm.
couldn't vote before, like all of this is insane to me. But now that we have that vote, most of those voters are not politically engaged or educated in
Sure.
politics, that we can really depend and rely on those numbers to help us move forward. So there's just always going to be a segment of America, white or black, who are just not politically engaged.
Well, and we
And
probably
we need
need to.
to make sure that those who are, we need to support them. And sometimes I'm like, you got to be careful just telling people to vote and you're not really talking to them about the issues. You're kind of acting oppressive. You know what I'm saying? You're like, yo, just vote, but you're not really telling them what their vote means to them. And so we have to create this system where we can trust the politically engaged in our communities,
Right.
then we have to have a layer of people who are creationists, right?
Sure.
Let me create the infrastructure that is going to support the people in my community. And then you have to have
But
people
you
who
know we
are
don't
really
trust each
focused
other.
on grooming our youth.
You know,
Like,
we don't trust each other though. Because you know how that conversation goes, right? Because
yeah,
inevitably what happens in that conversation is that, so when you start talking about, okay, let's create the systems to kind of make sure everybody is successful, then people start talking about who's going to create them systems, right? So then it's
yeah.
like,
And
well,
how
is it
and
going to
how
be
Oh
you or
my
is it going to
God.
be
Well,
me?
I didn't sign off on that. Okay,
Right.
who cares?
So I mean,
Do it, don't agree.
it's like how do we move beyond the pettiness within our community? And I think so. And for me, that's kind of where the conversation starts for me. So for me, a lot of the conversations I have, especially with young people, is focused on the idea of making sure we promote and we attach positive images to blackness, right?
Yes.
Because I think that's the first step. This concept of pride, I think Malcolm understood that. Like Malcolm was unapologetically black.
Mhm.
He was a black man first, and he projected the beauty of our culture, right?
Yes.
That's what he focused in on, trying to teach people about the greatness of themselves, right?
Yes.
So within the context of that, because I think that's the only way you get to a place where we can get beyond some of the petty conversations we have and start understanding that we are genuinely, truly in this together, and understand that, look, this may not be your lane. Like somebody else does shit better than I do it, right?
Yeah.
Like Greg is involved in, like, his job is, media and multimedia and all that type, is attached to that particular area and that particular field. I would be an idiot to be like, well, you know what, Greg, I am just going to do all the multimedia shit. I
Right.
know this is what you
Ego,
do
right?
for. I know this is what you do for a living. Because Greg will tell you, like, even when we started doing this shit, like, I was asking him all types of questions, like, "Hey,
right.
what do we do here?" Because because it's probably because I operate in a world where I rely on experts, so I'm
Mhm.
used to asking questions of folks, so I know what the
Yeah.
fuck I'm talking about. But you and I both know like how those conversations go, especially in the community you live in, Cam. Like,
Mhm.
it's just it's a different type of black person in those communities, especially when they're so invested in making sure that their only goal is maintaining the status quo and the
Yeah.
control of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And and I don't want anybody to take any of this to mean like I do not believe that Republicans are a good idea for anybody. I don't. But at the same time, like, I'm not gonna sit here and act like Democrats have done everything in the world for black folks. Like black
Yeah.
folks have not got a good return on their
It's treated
investment.
as like a charity case. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
It's their
With they
we're
like
their pet project.
we're worthy of handouts. So, but okay. So Robert, your law firm when you were here sponsored, community health networks, emotional emancipation facilitator training.
Uh,
And I remember you were there kind of briefly just to kind of get us kicked off, and I personally am grateful for Racial Justice Now and your law firm who gave us this opportunity. the
mm,
the thing is about follow through, right? So we
right.
haven't started
Right.
those circles,
Yeah.
but that 2-day training, when you say how do we start trusting each other, something like an emotional emancipation healing circle that goes across religion, that goes across profession.
Mm,
It allows us to connect with our truth. It allows us to see how we've been exploited on so many levels, right? Even from sexualizing each other.
sure.
And so when you start creating these circles, and participating in these circles, and maybe the target at first, I was like, well, how do we get the youth involved? Because really I just fucks with our youth. I feel like the adults are a little damaged. I don't have the energy. But if we're looking at our talented 10th,
Mm,
and we're putting them in these circles where they have to be confronted with our real history and with our real truths, and confronted with how they've internalized the lies,
mm,
it's things like that. And no, right now, if we're talking about in our lifetime, quote unquote, we don't have time for
Right.
that. But we have to make time for that. We have to understand who we are. This is what we've been talking about. Until we understand who we are, even Bible folk, my people perish for lack of knowledge. That's not verbatim, but y'all get
Right.
it. So until we tap into our knowledge of who we are, and how those narratives that we have carried about ourselves that were internalized from our slave masters, from our oppressors, from white supremacists, and even today, to make you feel like you ain't one of them other type of niggas, you not that type of black person. Until we reconcile that within, there's no way that we're ever going to be able to move as a collective, unfortunately. So until then,
Yeah.
we got builders like the three people on this podcast, and those who believe in really creating a space for ourselves, and we figure out how to work together. And I'm a true believer that if you start doing the work and people start seeing the impact from the work, they're going to want to get on board, because that's just how we are.
Well, shit. I can't think of a better place to to end the session on than
Ah,
than that. I mean, we've been going for a little while. We could definitely talk all night, but look, folks got responsibilities, and
Yeah.
Kim is trying to finish her bottle of wine. So,
Hey,
uh,
and my glass says wine is the answer. So
it
now what
is
was
the
the
answer. What's the question, right?
question? But
So,
I do want to throw this out here because
yeah,
I've been talking, about the spirituality part because I believe in it.
right,
If it were not for me tapping into my path, my spiritual development and spiritual growth, trust me, I still be out here trying to fight us and them, and
sure,
that's not a solution. So, if anybody wants to start, and tap and just kind of really getting a foundation from a historical point of view, because you brought up the matriarchy of African culture, but even when it comes to trade and profession. So in our ancestral culture, if your path, if you were born to be a doctor but no one in your family was a doctor, you lived with another family who could practice. You know what I'm saying? So there are a lot of things where we just depended on one another to teach us from the ground up, based on our destiny and based on our purpose and based on our path. So if people want to read it's not heavy, you don't have to like get your mental gears. It really seems like a fictional book, but it is actually a true account of a guy who was in an African village, the Dagra people, and he was kidnapped at the age of 5, and he was sent into a seminary, to basically be indoctrinated. And 15 years later, he escaped, went back to his village, and was initiated as a tribesman. And he had to really reconcile the fact that he had been in the white man's world, and now he's back home, and what that looks like. And so the name of that book is called of spirit and the of water and of the spirit, and it's by Patrice Maladome Some, and it's the true account. And I recommend, if anybody just wants to, like, again, this is foundational because we're looking at our true indoctrination. So this happened, he was born around 1856. And so this, we're talking about a true indoctrination of not 1856, I'm sorry, 1956 actually. But we're talking about a true stealing of a people from their land, because his family befriended the missionaries, and but it was also his purpose, and a lot of us don't understand our purpose. So again, it's called Of Water and of the Spirit by Patrice Maladome Some. Again, it's a very, very good book. It gives historical context. It looks at the political system. It looks at how when African countries regained their independence, it was given to those African leaders who would continue the legacy of imperialism, so that the British and the European countries can could continue to keep the resources of the land, and the people still had nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, we'll have to put that in the show notes. Link to that for sure.
Definitely we do.
So,
But I mean, like real talk. I mean, it was a good conversation, and just I mean, from the perspective of actually wanting freedom, and Malcolm used to talk about this all the time, and I use Malcolm a lot just because the autobiography changed my life. I read it in high school, and it,
mm-hmm,
it literally changed the trajectory of my life. Like I mean, it,
mm-hmm,
it changed the way I thought about stuff, and I think it should be. I think it should be required reading for any black person anywhere. I mean, you should read it, but one of the things I think is a common thread and common theme, and I've even found that just within my lifetime is that if you really are choosing to seek out actual and genuine freedom, whether that be politically, socially, spiritually, whatever you're talking about, freedom is first and foremost an inner recognition of self-respect, right? Um, I mean,
self love, baby.
first and foremost, right? Like you have to understand yourself, and yeah, and we have to learn to forgive ourselves, right?
Yes,
We have a hard time doing that, but it starts there. And once you have a certain level of self respect for yourself, you won't settle for certain things, and you won't allow
yes,
yourself to be treated certain ways, whether that be socially, politically, intimately, however you want to characterize that.
yes,
But the reality is that's the first step is developing that level of self-respect. And I think that's one of the core principles that Malcolm understood and he tried to
yes,
instill in our people is a level of self-respect to say, look, you need to recognize your own greatness and what you're capable of, which is why he would talk about the idea of separating, because the idea would be like, look, we don't need other people in order to be successful and do what we need to do. So,
yeah.
um, you know, I enjoyed the topic today and the conversation, the podcast. Cam, I appreciate you. Shit, Greg, I don't know if you got anything closing to let everybody know about before we jump into the What the Fuck News segment.
3 books.
Read books. I
3 books.
agree.
Yeah,
I
three.
bet you I can
How
guess
many
one
What?
books I
already.
started but don't finish because black folks love academic talk in their books. I'm like, yo, I'm just trying to digest, but
Yeah,
read.
yeah.
You have to be informed.
It'll be 4 if you count the book Cam just talked about, but 3 books. Get the soul of black folk. That's W.B. Du Bois. Uh,
Yes.
get the autobiography of Malcolm X. I mean, man, just what Haley did with that is just amazing. And get Clark V. Woodson, Miseducation of the Negro. I'm
Of
just gonna
course.
tell you right now.
It just a little side note. Our we had it put on the book list at rate for Dayton Public Schools, and it was told to us. Now I don't know if it was a manipulation of the truth, but it was told to us that our educators did not think our children were astute enough to read that, and I personally believe people just didn't want to face their truth.
Didn't.
Exactly.
Facts. I mean, that those books are on my bookcase. I got them all. I got a couple other ones too. We'll have to do that sometime. Run through our top, our book list or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But shit. Hey, I had a good time. Cam, we appreciate
I
you coming on.
appreciate you guys. This was a great conversation. Thank
See,
you.
But
no
look, stick
problem.
around. Stick around here. We got the What the Fuck News segment coming up. I'll let Greg go as always. Age before beauty, my brother. So
Uh,
you go ahead and do what you need to do. I think you
okay.
sent me some shit. So go ahead.
Yeah. So what I sent you was from Kenosha, Wisconsin. So the residents of the town are a little bit peeved at this educator because she decided that she wanted to teach her class a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement. And so all the parents and they just got so upset and they ran up to the school and wanted her fired. Because she teaches 4th grade, so I guess they thinking those kids are too young to be understanding all of this trouble and strife of Black Lives Matter or whatever. So um, it's just a what the fuck. Like you motherfuckers kill me. Like seriously, y'all that insecure about some shit that somebody who's doing their job,
All right.
she's doing her job, she's trying
Yes.
to educate the youth so that they grow up to be better than what and who you are,
Yeah.
and you go and try to get the woman fired. So what the fuck,
What
What the
the fuck? For real. Nah, man, that's a good one, man. Mine was I just because I couldn't believe it was real. So, did you guys see this news stuff about Rudy Giuliani? And
Oh
Oh,
yes,
oh
no,
wait, oh
well,
yeah.
I don't know what you guys are saying. Oh yes to because so I want to make
I
sure we're talking
saw
about the
it.
same shit.
Hold
So
on before
the
let me clear this up. I said Kenosha, I meant Burlington, Wisconsin before
okay.
people look at it. Go ahead.
So I've never watched the first Borat movie, but apparently this cat has Sasha Cohen has a new movie out. It's the Borat sequel, which
Yeah.
is basically I guess I gotta watch the movie because I
You gotta
guess it's
see
out.
the first one. It's amazing.
But and I guess the new one's out. So long story short, as part of this movie, like Sasha Baron Cohen, he basically does like just he punks people, right? That's basically what he does. So supposedly he's got an actress that poses as his 15-year-old daughter, and she's interviewing Giuliani. So long story short, Giuliani's got her in a hotel room, and it's like he wants to start doing some shit, and this is all on video. And like, so he's like reaching in his pants, and all of a sudden, so Sasha Cohen, in Borat style, busts out. He's got like some panties on and like a bra, and so Rudy Giuliani leaves the room, and eventually, I guess he calls the police, and then Sasha Cohen runs. Like, so long story short, I think there were some lawyers that got involved, but I'm looking at it like I'm like, okay, is this shit real? Because I was looking everywhere, like, is this like a satire shit? But no, I guess it's real talk. Like, Giuliani had to actually give a public statement and say he didn't do anything wrong during the interview. He was simply trying to take off his mic. Wasn't what was going on. I haven't actually even seen the video yet. I have to watch the little clip, but
Oh.
so apparently he go like apparently it's not. And so I read this morning. Apparently they did another kind of punk scenario where the same actress she she kind of poses as an intern for one of these White House correspondents, one of these news networks that is in Trump's pocket basically. And so she's in there just asking all these real questions to the Trump administration, and this is all part of the movie, right? So, and of course, he just released this shit like now in the middle of like the election, probably just to really fuck with Trump. But I thought that Giuliani shit was bananas. I'm like, why isn't more people talking about this? Like, I mean, he may who knows if he was up to some shit or not, but fuck that guy Giuliani first and foremost. Like, he's an
I agree.
asshole. But
Hey,
so,
Yeah.
so
Facts.
I'll put that link on there. But I thought that shit was bananas. I'm like, oh, for real? That's how we getting down, and I believe all that shit. So, but shit, hey, well, shit, Cam, I don't know. Do you ever what the fuck? You may not have come prepared.
well, I don't know if this is a what the fuck, but this is definitely I'm rooting for everybody black moment. So y'all heard about Shonda Rhimes quitting
Oh yeah,
ABC because they
over.
wouldn't pay for her
She,
Disney World
hey,
ticket, and
hey,
I love
I ain't
it.
mad at her. I ain't mad at her. Like she's like, look, if anyway she can't get a ticket, like, come on, man. Like,
Come on
The
now,
amount of
and
money
ABC and
that
Disney owns ABC,
well, yeah.
so
she's like,
and
I
she
ain't
done
paying for
made
that
all
shit.
the money for ABC. She
Right,
revitalized ABC.
right.
All the
Y'all gonna
money.
give her $154 ticket?
Fuck out of here. Like, fuck out of here.
I
I'm
mean,
cool.
looked at her. I mean, they looked at her like, you really asking us this?
Right.
And I see that's what I'm saying. Not to, but it goes back to what we're saying. Like, I'm not in the position to just kind of walk. Well, I guess I have put myself in a position, but she's in a position that she can walk away from her oppressor under any condition. Like, yo,
Well, that's because that's when you become dangerous. Like, not to, I mean, jumping back in some of the serious shit. Like, that's why Cube is a problem for them because he's economically independent, right? So
yep,
he's gotten to a place now where he doesn't need Democrats or Republicans to do anything. Like, he can just sit and do his
yes,
own shit.
and
So, and that's why you
that,
see this backlash on both sides. Like, what the fuck's going on? So,
yep.
but before
So she'll
I
be dragged at some point in the future,
oh
but
yeah, oh yeah,
as of,
you know
as
that.
today, I'm rooting for everybody black, and I'm proud of
Facts
my sister for
always,
like just giving
always.
them the middle finger.
Exactly.
She
Shit,
gave them her own personal what the fuck. Like, really?
for real. Hey, I ain't mad at her too. Shit, holla at us. But hey, we appreciate you, Cam, for coming on.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that once you on the podcast, you now podcast fam. So it's all good. You was
Yay.
fan before that, but it's
Yeah.
all good. We appreciate y'all for listening. As always, thanks for joining us on this episode of the All Out of Fucks podcast. Make sure to check us out on Instagram, All Out of Fucks podcast, our Twitter account, All Out of Fucks pod. That's FUXPOD, and our website, alloutoffuckspodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, via our RSS feed, or whatever other platform you want to take a look at. While you're at it, if you liked what you heard, then we'd appreciate you heading over to whatever platform you're listening to us on and give us, whatever, a 5-star review or subscribe or whatever it is. Tell a friend, tell a family member. Drop into the DMs, holla at us, drop into our comment section. We're not afraid to have any conversations. We appreciate y'all. Shit, Greg, go ahead and send us out.
Yep, as always, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. It's the All Out of Fucks podcast. We're on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Lipson, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We everywhere, and we're all out of fucks. We gives 2 fucks. So
None of them. He gives
he
two. We gives none though.
he gives none. I gives maybe 2 fucks. With All
Not
Out of
really
Fucks
though.
podcast. We out.
2 teardrops in a bucket. Fuck
Fuck
it.
it.
We out. Peace.